So we just received another amazing win against the ATF in their current overreach. The 6th Circuit Court of Appeals just struck down the ATF's bump stock rule. So let's talk about this. But real quick, before we jump into this video, I want to thank everybody who's currently supporting the channel, who's subscribed to the channel. We are currently rapidly approaching 500,000 subscribers here on the channel. So I just wanted to say thank you and also mention that if you're not currently subscribed, please consider subscribing and help us reach that 500,000 subscriber goal. Also, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Sonoran Desert Institute. SDI is an accredited online college that helps students learn the skills and techniques they'll need to be successful in the firearms industry. So if you enjoy gun repair, ballistics, and learning about firearms, SDI might be a good option for you. To find out more about SDI, you can visit the website link down below. And thank you again to SDI for sponsoring this video. As I mentioned in the intro, we just received another major Second Amendment win coming out of the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals. A 3-judge panel in the 6th Circuit just ruled in the Hardin v. ATF case, and they found that the ATF's final rule on bump stocks is in fact invalid. This decision strikes another major blow to the ATF's current overreach and their ability to create new rules whenever they feel like it to regulate various items. This case, Hardin, is a direct challenge to the new restrictions that are put in place by the ATF and their final rule on bump stocks. One of the important aspects of this lawsuit is whether Chevron deference should be given to the ATF in relation to their final rule on bump stocks, or whether a different rule called the rule of lenity would in fact direct courts to rule in a way that is more favorable to us, the people, not the ATF. Now, important for this lawsuit and what the court did here, we need to talk about what Chevron deference is, and then also what the rule of lenity is. Chevron deference is a term coined after a landmark case, which refers to the doctrine of judicial deference given to administrative actions. Generally, for an agency to be given Chevron deference, the agency's interpretation of an ambiguous statute, and again, that's very important, there has to be some sort of ambiguity, their interpretation needs to be rational or reasonable. So when a statute has ambiguous terms, the agency responsible for enforcing the statute, like the ATF, may be able to determine what a term was intended to mean by Congress as long as their interpretation is deemed rational or reasonable. Now, in contrast to Chevron deference, there is something different, which is called the rule of lenity. And the rule of lenity indicates that when dealing with criminal statutory interpretation, a court is required to apply any unclear or ambiguous law in a way that is most favorable to us, the people, not the enforcement agency. Well, in a unanimous opinion by the 6th Circuit panel here, they found that the ATF's current actions are in fact invalid. The opinion states that the placement of a bump stock on a semi-automatic rifle causes the rifle to function essentially like a machine gun by dramatically increasing the rate of fire. And the possession of a machine gun is a criminal offense under the GCA of 1968. This raises the question of whether a bump stock is a machine gun part as defined by the National Firearms Act of 1934. The question is a close one on which reasonable jurists have disagreed, a disagreement caused by ambiguities in how the applicable statute defines the term machine gun. The court here goes on to state that an act of Congress could clear up these ambiguities, but so far, Congress has failed to act. The ATF has been on both sides of this issue, with the current regulation, the rule, banning bump stocks as a machine gun part. In this situation, the rule of lenity that is applicable to criminal offenses requires us to rule in favor of Hardin. We therefore reverse the judgment of the district court and remand for further proceedings consistent with this opinion. Now, first, looking at that, I want to state that I don't necessarily agree with the court. What they're kind of saying here is that bump stocks functionally maybe operate as a firearm that is full auto and that it operates as a machine gun. I think that the 5th Circuit's decision in Cargill was much clearer on this issue, was more clear on the technical intricacies of how an automatic firearm actually functions and how a semi-automatic firearm with a bump stock attached will actually operate. But regardless, I think that the 6th Circuit here in the Hardin case still ultimately reached the right conclusion that the ATF has overstepped its authority. This court here states in their opinion that whether a bump stock is a machine gun part depends on how one interprets the definition of a machine gun as set forth in the NFA. Then they go on to point out that there are 22 different opinions through various circuit courts, through various district courts that have tried to address this very issue. Then they state that Hardin argues that the statutory definition of a machine gun unambiguously excludes bump stocks whereas the ATF argues that the best reading of the statute compels the opposite conclusion. The viability of competing interpretations is exemplified not only by the myriad of conflicting judicial opinions on this issue, but also by the ATF's own flip-flop in its position. And because the statute is subject to more than one reasonable interpretation, it is ambiguous. Now, here I want to point out that what the court is doing here in the Hardin case is a little bit different from what the Fifth Circuit en banc panel did in the Cargill case. In Cargill, the Fifth Circuit en banc panel found that the text of the NFA and GCA was very clear, and that the plain text expressly does not include items like bump stocks, and that bump stocks are not included in the term machine gun. Then later in that same opinion, they went on to say, well, even if the term machine gun was indeed ambiguous, you would use something like the rule of lenity, not Chevron deference. Well, here in the Sixth Circuit Hardin case, the court is stating from the very beginning that their position is that the term in the statute is in fact ambiguous, and therefore they're going to move on to determine what the term is actually intended to mean. And they're going to try to determine what type of doctrine needs to be used to clear up that ambiguity. Should they be using Chevron deference, or should they be using the rule of lenity? Ultimately, they go on to state that we conclude that the particular statutory scheme before us is not an appropriate one to apply Chevron deference. We so hold because the statutory scheme is predominantly criminal in scope, and because of the nature of the actions that it criminalizes. The Sixth Circuit here is stating that Chevron would not apply in this case when a statute is ambiguous, and also when the statute is primarily focused on criminal applications. They say here that's what the NFA and GCA is, and therefore Chevron does not need to be applied. Instead, they say when dealing with a case like this, the rule of lenity should be in fact used. Here, the Sixth Circuit adopts some of the rationale used in the Cargill decision, and they find that since the statute here does not clearly and unambiguously prohibit bump stocks as so-called machine guns, then they are not machine guns. Therefore, the ATF's bump stock rule and the ATF's actions are in fact invalid. This ultimately means that if the ATF wants to regulate these types of items, well then Congress needs to go in and change the statutory definition. But the ATF cannot do that on their own. They cannot just simply create laws whenever they want and just redefine the statute whenever it kind of suits them because they want to regulate these types of items. Now, there's also a concurrence in this opinion from Judge Bush, and this is actually one of the ones where I more agree with his rationale in this concurrence because he goes a little bit further than what the majority says. He takes a position similar to what the Cargill majority did, that the statutory text and the definition of machine gun expressly does not include bump stocks because bump stocks do not function as an actual machine gun. The mechanisms are very different. So that's the opinion by the Sixth Circuit panel here, which once again is striking down the ATF's bump stock rule. Also, this case is going to be very important for a different case, which we've mentioned, Cargill, which is currently seeking Supreme Court review. In that case, the ATF was essentially forced to try to seek Supreme Court review to try to get the Supreme Court to ultimately agree with them and to uphold their bump stock rule. Well, now you have a new circuit, the Sixth Circuit, which has come to the same conclusion as the Fifth Circuit, that this type of rule by the ATF is 100% invalid. But if we get any more information, I will let you all know. Also, if you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. As always, I want to thank everybody who likes, comments, subscribes, who hits the notification bell, who shares these videos. You guys are directly impacting these videos, impacting this channel, and helping me to reach and educate more people than I could ever do on my own. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.